to me, that's got to take a toll on your body, and why he wouldn't try to exert some of that energy out of Sanchez and try to take him to the ground and try to make him force not to get takedown and the sprawl and all that tires people out, just as BJ Penn. So the fact that he was just standing there and almost played into his game plan and allowed him to take control of the center of the octagon was very weird. And then, I mean, you just look at it in the third round, he's like almost too concerned with playing to the judges and the crowd and smiling and trying to get the crowd into it. And it's like, what do you do? I mean, was he that delusional? Did he actually really think that he was winning? Or was he just trying to, kind of bait him into getting knocked out? I have no idea what Joe Stevenson was doing. But I'll say this. Joe Stevenson needs to, figure things out now, because he's lost 3 fights now in over a year to top-tier talent. You can beat the Gleison Tebows all you want, but if you can't beat those guys, I mean, you need to kind of go back to the drawing board.
Actually, I think you did nail it on him being delusional, and that was his thought process. So you actually got audio from the corner going to the third round, and all they said was, hey, you got to fight a good third round. Like, no, you don't have to fight a good third round. You got to finish this fight. You are down 2-0. You lost the first 2 rounds, so go out and throw caution to the wind. He didn't do that, and like you mentioned, I think it was like 3 minutes left in the round. There's a little exchange, and Sanchez backs up and asks the crowd for noise. Like, don't worry about the crowd. Don't worry about the noise coming in. Create the noise. Go and push the pace. So, I don't know. It's I don't want to kill Joe Stevenson. It was just a little disappointing. I think he could have done a lot more in the fight. And I now think, I know you weren't happy with the fact that he was even on this card in a main event, but I think he's really got to re-examine where his best spot is. I know before the fight he talked about, well, I could move up. He's not moving up. He's barely big enough and tall enough for 155. Now, he'd have to lose a lot of mass. He's a thick guy, across the shoulders and the arms, but he may have to think after this loss to Diego Sanchez about going down and making a go at it in the WEC at 145 pounds.
I think he's a few losses away from doing that. I don't think anyone who is in main eventing UFC cards want to, sort of swallow that pill and move down to the WEC. All due respect to the WEC, but right now it's just not positioned as the big time. But it's so frustrating to watch Stevenson fight in his last few fights, even the Kenny Florian one, the way he was just totally manhandled on the ground. This guy's training with Robert Drysdale, who's one of the most acclaimed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist in the world right now, a guy who's trying to transition himself into MMA, and he's not even utilizing anything that he's learning. He's a new black belt, just got it a couple of months ago, and this fight did nothing to prove that he is a top-tier 155er, and it's weird. This is, Ultimate Fighter 2 winner. The guy has had many opportunities. I mean, how many guys lose a title shot and then get another crack at the number one contender spot, a few months later, and then again get to main event a card? It doesn't happen often. Apparently the UFC is a really big fan of his, and he always puts out entertaining fights, but he is doing nothing to prove that he is, in that top 10 right now in the UFC's lightweight division.
You don't think he's in the top 10?
I think he's, kind of sitting around 10 right now. If you're being nice, I mean, who is he beaten? In that's you got to beat BJ Penn, Kenny Florian, or Diego Sanchez to be argued in that top 10.
I think that's an argument for the top 5. I don't know if that puts you out of the top 10. We can put together a list of fighters. I mean, if
let's do it. Let's do it. I mean, you got those 3 guys that I just mentioned. Frankie Edgar, Tyson Griffin, Gray Maynard. Already we're at number 6. Well,
I don't know that I'm ready to give either Griffin or Maynard a slot. Maybe Griffin, but I don't know if I'm ready to give Maynard a slot ahead of Joe Stevenson. We'll see. I mean, I think he's towards the tail end of the top 10. You know what? I think that stigma, I understand the UFC is gigantic compared to the WEC, but I think across the board at Zuffa, they need to get rid of that stigma that going to the WEC and competing at 145 is a bad thing. You can be a superstar down there, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about fighting at 145 pounds.
Well, I think they're going a long way in terms of doing that by getting rid of, the 185 division, 205, now 170, so there's no crossover. The only division where there is a crossover is at 155. But, it's just, I think it's just the fact that they don't have pay-per-view. Everyone loves the allure of being on pay-per-view. Versus is kind of a new network as opposed to Spike, even though they're kind of new in their own right. But you're totally right. I mean, now they're really establishing themselves as the sort of lighter, younger promotion. A guy like Manny Gamburian, who a lot of people thought should have won the 5th season of The Ultimate Fighter, is just going down now. So I think that's going to start to change. But, recently it hasn't really been positioned as, on par with the UFC.
It's Steve Cofield, Ariel Helwani back in New York. I'm here in Vegas. It's the Jewelers of Las Vegas post-fight show. A lot of good guest spots coming up as we're breaking down UFC 95. We'll get to some of the boxing. Miguel Cotto, a winner. Kelly Pavlik, a winner. Kevin Iole is going to join us from Yahoo Sports, from the Canadian press. He was over at UFC 95. Neil Davidson will be on with us, the head of UK operations, essentially the Dana White over in the UK for the UFC. Marcel Zelaznik will be on with us. We'll get a couple of fighters on as well. Damian Maia and Dan Hardy are going to check in for conversations. So the other side of this fight was Diego Sanchez. So he comes down. He did not fall victim like many people do to that initial weight cut and gassing and looking like crap at the new weight. He did mix it up pretty well. I thought there were different moments where he didn't look like he had a ton of power on his punches and was a little bit slow, but for the most part, at least he mixed it up, and the guy is a damn good fighter. Now, what does that mean for the 55 class in the UFC? Where does Diego Sanchez fall in the pecking order?
Diego Sanchez, man, it's funny that they opened the show saying that he is the original Ultimate Fighter winner because, he did win that title 30 minutes or so before Forrest Griffin did, but it seems as though from that early class, he's kind of the forgotten man because we've heard so much and we've seen so much out of Koscheck and Kenny Florian from that first season. And Diego Sanchez kind of went away for a minute. He had those 2 losses in a row, devastating losses. Remember, he was undefeated, something like, I think it was like 16-0, something like that. He was just on an incredible run and then loses twice in a row, once to Koscheck, once to John Fitch, and then had to rebuild himself with, they gave him lesser opponents, just in terms of their pedigree, and then he was able to defeat them pretty handily. And now he comes back at 155, redefines himself. Never even got a title shot at 170 after that huge, that huge streak that he was on. I say, let's put him in there against Sean Sherk. Sean Sherk's the guy who's kind of trying to figure himself out. He lost to B.J. Penn. He's not going to get that title shot right away because Florian's fighting him. Here you got a guy, Diego Sanchez, who's doing great things at 170. People respect him. Now he looked very dominant at 155. Let's see who's better between those two guys, and, the winner kind of advances as the number one contender spot. I don't see anyone else that has the same amount of background and stuff on his resume that Sanchez does, regardless of the fact that it was at 170.
Yeah, I would say Sean Sherk, maybe Tyson Griffin, or Gray Maynard would be the top choices for Diego to face before he gets a shot at B.J. Penn.
And the reason I said Sean Sherk is because Griffin and Maynard have fights coming up themselves in the next couple of months, and Sherk doesn't. So, obviously it's just a couple of months, but it would be good to have Diego. I don't think that, he overexerted himself too much in this fight. It'd be good to have him come back fairly soon, maybe in 2-3 months, and see him fight a really tough opponent, and a guy that, steroids or not, whatever you want to say, is one of the best out there and still is.
It would be a hell of a fight. There's Sean Sherk's one of those guys who obviously has a label after the steroid. Can we say use? At least a positive test that he's got the stigma now, but no one can deny the fact that he is an intriguing matchup against so many different fighters because his stand-up is getting a little better. He's pretty fast on the feet, and obviously he can wrestle and ground and pound with anyone out there. So Diego Sanchez, nice debut at 155, and it sets up some super fights in this division down the road. All right, 85, I think, was the other story, the middleweight class, 185. And we saw essentially a night of eliminators with 4 fighters who, probably all in that, 3 to maybe, 4 to 10 range. Who are you most impressed with? Nate Marquardt, who was a winner in 3 rounds, finishing off Wilson Gouveia, or Damian Maia, who quickly finished with another submission against Chael Sonnen? Without a doubt, Maia. Maia has been on an incredible run. 5 submissions in a row in his 5 UFC fights. 4 of them have won submission of the night. And the way he does it is just, they're all highlight reels. This guy is the UFC's version of the human highlight reel. He is just, the way he submitted, and just watching that whole thing, that whole submission unfold from the stand-up, over into taking him to Sonnen to the ground was pretty incredible. I don't have him, the last time I sent in my rankings to WAMA, I didn't have him in the top 5. Now he's definitely in my top 5, and I'd like to see him. If there's no one out there that they want to put him up against, in the next few months, which I'm sure there is, but I think he is ready to face the winner of Anderson Silva, Taz Slatus.